So we're on section 8.3 and we're going to talk about the brain, the organ of the mind. The brain is the largest, most important part of your body, actually, the brain. And we're going to find out the parts of your brain and divide the parts of the brain into, here we go, into subparts. So the brain is divided into three different parts. The cerebrum, of course, there's a right and left hemisphere of the cerebrum, right and left sides. And then we have the cerebellum, this section here. And then we have the brainstem, which is all of this together down here. Well, the midbrain and the pons and the medulla oblongata is the brainstem. And then you have these glands in here. So these glands are really not part of your brain. So you have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the midbrain, which includes those. So the cerebrum, this part, the top part of your brain, coordinates thought, memory, and your learned behaviors. The cerebellum is the lower part of your brain and helps control balance and coordination. So you can balance and coordinate your muscle activities. And then the brainstem, which is this part down here, 1, 2, 3, this brainstem. This brainstem is where you connects to the spinal cord, but it controls your involuntary muscles that have activities of the nervous system. So those things like your heart beating and your breathing and your gastrointestinal tract and all that would be in the brainstem. When it happens, when someone has a brain injury and gets down to the brainstem, most people die at that point because that will affect your breathing, right? So a brain weighs how much? I said 3 pounds, right? And it contains over 100 billion neurons, and each are linked to 100,000 others, which form 10 quadrillion connections. Can you believe that? It's beyond human comprehension. So now let's talk a little bit about the cerebrum. Let's talk a little bit about the cerebrum first, more about that, and then we'll go on to the cerebellum. The cerebrum is your thought and your will, your consciousness, your memory, your voluntary actions, your intelligence, and your thinking. And it's divided into the right and left hemispheres, and it's split with this longitudinal fissure called as a deep groove in between the left and the right of the brain. And this is called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum there. And that's this, they communicate through this massive nerve fibers called corpus callosum at the base of the cerebrum, the base of the cerebrum here. So, well, this actually is between, you see the thalamus and such, the corpus callosum. But above this, the cerebrum has a fissure to divide it into the right and left. So they're just showing you the right. So this thing's here, and then there's a right. This is the right side, and then you would see the left side too. You can't see the left side on that side. So let's see, maybe I can see if the next one, maybe the next picture shows a better picture of the brain. Okay, maybe there. See where the corpus callosum is? And then you see you're going to see the gray matter and the white matter, and what the gray matter looks like, because gray matter is mainly made of cell bodies, as we told before, and the white matter is axons. So we have these cell bodies. So basically you're going to have all the cells pointing with the cell bodies on one side and the white matter, the axons, on the other side. So, and here you have the corpus callosum, and you have the cross section. You have the right and left parts of your brain. Okay, so the right side of the body. So here is the left and the right brain, okay? So the left brain goes to the right side, and the right brain goes to the left side. So if you're right-handed, you're gonna be a left brainer, right? And if you're left-handed, you're gonna be a right brainer. So it's just crisscrossed. So what do each side do? So the brain, the right brain is a left-handed person. Well, usually a left-handed person, if you go on this side, the right brain onto the left side is, going on to the right brain. So you're going to have the language, right? Mathematical abilities, written language. So this would be if you're left hand control to the right hand control. Written language, scientific skills, logical thinking. And onto the left brain, you'd be right-handed control, artistic awareness, three-dimensional perception, intuition, imagination, music awareness, those kinds of things. So it's not always the case, but anyway, you have those two different sides. So let's go on here to the gray and white matter. Okay. The gray matter and white matter are the two layers of tissue, and the gray are largely these nerve cell bodies, because they lack their gray because they don't have the myelin fatty covers on them, so it turns them gray. And they are located mostly in the cerebral cortex. The gray matter, this is the cortex, the very out layer of it. This is cortex, right? The cerebral cortex there. That's where the gray matter. So you always hear gray matter and white matter in your brain. And they consist of nerve cell bodies, like I said. And the white matter has the myelin covers, has the fatty covers. White matter have large bundles of myelin covered with nerve fibers that extend from cell bodies in the cerebral cortex. So it kind of shows that picture there anyway. So the messages generate in the cortex and travel along these fibers to other areas of the brain in the spinal cord or body parts. So you can see how the gray matter, here you have gray matter. Let's show this here. So you have a longitudinal fissures here, right here, and then you have right this, and this shows the gray matter and the white matter, a little cross section of that. All right, let's go on to the next. That's a lot of stuff there. What other, it says, they never really knew about the lobes very much and what parts of the brain would produce certain things, like what parts of the brain are speech centers and which part of the brain are our sight centers where we see. They never knew before, but they just observed people with brain damage to see special paralysis of what part of brain between 1800 and 1900. But in the mid-1900s, they started doing surgery. Neural surgery, in that way, they could look at a person's brain and try to repair damages of the brain. And that's pretty new from the 19th century on. So here we have the functional location of the cerebral cortex. So we have these cerebral lobes, right? Of the cerebrum. Cerebrum is what we're talking about so far, just the cerebrum. So we have the frontal lobes right here. What does the frontal lobe do? Well, if you damage your frontal lobe, you're going to have problems with your personality, with your judgment, and your self-control. And the rear of the frontal lobe is called the motor area and controls the voluntary movement of the skeletal muscles. So thought encompasses frontal lobe and personality. Onto the parietal lobe, the different areas of the parietal lobe, frontal lobe. They really don't say basically function. The parietal lobe are the sides, the lobes. The parietal lobe is behind the frontal lobe. Okay, is behind the frontal lobe. And this is where you can analyze the senses on your sides of your body. You feel sensations, temperature, pressure, and pain, and you can make judgments in your parietal lobes. The occipital lobe, of course, occipital means back of your brain. And if you damage the back of your brain, then that back of your brain is going to cause you to not be able to see. When somebody falls and you hit the back of your head and all of a sudden you're seeing stars, that's because your vision is in the back of your brain. So even if your eyes are okay, if you hurt the back of your brain, visual cortex right here, it says for vision, the back of your brain, you're going to have problems with shape, color, movement, tracking, but you'll have problems. You could become blind just by hitting the back of the brain, even if your eyes are okay. And then we have the temporal lobes, and they're located on the sides of the brain, and they're associated by your ears for hearing and taste and smell. So you have 4 lobes. You have the frontal lobes, you have the parietal lobes, and you have the occipital lobes and the temporal lobes, and you have the right and left of both of those. You can see where speech and hearing and memory by just looking at this and all the different areas they have here, the functional locations of the cerebral cortex. Cerebral means cerebrum, areas. So here's a picture down here. Brain activity in a person reciting synonyms. It's kind of weird. They found out exactly part of the brain when you talk about synonyms. So here we go. Now we're going to talk about the onto the cerebellum. Before we talk about cerebellum, let's talk about this, cerebral palsy, because that's of the cerebrum. And that's when a person's brain was probably damaged at birth. And so when you're going through your birth canal, you can see a baby's head gets damaged and the cerebrum gets damaged. And so that later on, since it's damaged, the person will have cerebral palsy, inability to walk, poor speech, irregular contractions of the face or neck. They maybe be affected on one side or both sides. The thing about cerebral palsy is that the person usually has all their intellect there, but they just have so many motor problems. It's hard to be able to express themselves, the cerebral palsy. I don't know if you know anybody with cerebral palsy, but let's talk about the cerebellum. So the cerebellum is, there's our picture right here, the cerebellum. So here we have this cerebrum up here, and we have this cerebellum here. And here's the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere in the cerebellum, and there's the white matter and the gray matter. And the brain stem's down here, right? Brain stem and the spinal cords goes down here, so you see. So the cerebellum is the muscle coordination, where all your muscle coordination is. It's the second largest region behind the brainstem. I just showed it to you. And it has right and left hemispheres. The grooves are smaller and it's tightly packed in there, so it's more dense than the cerebrum. And of course it has its white and gray matter. And its function is to coordinate the skeletal muscle activities. In many things that you don't have to think about. So like they gave the example, when you learn how to swim, first of all, when you learn how to swim, you first learn how to think about every little thing you do. But after you start swimming, pretty soon you just do it naturally, right? So that's what the cerebellum does. It helps you coordinate and be able to do things without thinking about it. And it is the most complex muscle coordination is handled. So any complex muscle coordination is going to be handled in the cerebellum. And if this area is damaged, you're going to have problems of doing any kinds of simple tasks because you won't remember how to do them. It'll take a hard time doing them because the cerebellum is where you actually learn to do this muscle coordination very easily. And if you don't, you're not going to have problems even like tying your shoes or doing anything. So that's the cerebellum. So let's go down to the brainstem. The brainstem is where involuntary functions are. So, it's 3 different parts of the brainstem. You have the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So the medulla oblongata regulates your breathing. That's this here. So you can breathe, and your heartbeat and your blood pressure and your swallowing and your sneezing are all in the medulla oblongata. The pons is just above the medulla, and pons is Latin for bridge, because it's a bridge between these 2 parts, right? This pons area looks like a bridge. And it links the cerebrum with the cerebellum, and it assists the medulla in regulating breathing and some eye coordination, movements, and facial expressions too. And on to the midbrain. So we had the medulla oblongata, pons, midbrain. I hope I didn't point to the right. I hope I pointed to the right one there. So, but anyway, here's the Here's the medulla oblongata, then here's the pons, the bridge-like, and here's the midbrain. And the midbrain, what does the midbrain do? It coordinates movements of both your eyes and adjusts the size of your pupils to light, and it operates your lens. You can imagine this part of your body operating those parts of your eyes. It's pretty spectacular. So let's go on here. So this is low battery. Hope I don't get too low battery. Let me see this. Can you see anything here? I don't want to, let's go on. I hope that I'm still recording. So going on to the reticular formation. I'm afraid I might lose some things. Okay, oh, there we go. So anyway, let's finish up real quick because I'm on low power mode. Reticular formation is an intricate network called a master switch. And it's of the cerebrum, but it also, it wakes you up in the morning. So when you're sleeping, what wakes you up? The reticular formation wakes you up. What shuts down when you sleep? The reticular formation shuts down for you to sleep. And it also adjusts your alertness in the day. So that's the reticular formation. It activates the high alerts. And if someone has that reticular formation, here's a picture of where the reticular formation is. I didn't show that to you. If you have a problem in that area, you're going to slip into a coma. Let's just say that. And it also keeps your body balanced and upright, that reticular formation right there. So let's go on to the next. We're almost done with this, so I want to finish up. So we have the thalamus and the hypothalamus. And so they're parts of what's called the limbic system. Here's the limbic system. The limbic system coordinates, when you think of limbic, I think of emotions. You know, it's different emotions we have in the limbic system. It's involved in coordinating the activity of different parts of your brain, but also in generating emotions and desires with incoming sensory powers. Emotions and desires with the limbic emotion. Some different glands, I should say, or organs of the limbic system are the thalamus and the hypothalamus are two of them, and they're parts of the limbic system. The hypothalamus, you know, where we're looking at the hypothalamus, and you're looking at the hippocampus is going to be another part, and the thalamus here. See where the thalamus is and the hypothalamus? Pretty tiny, but they're little areas that are very important. The thalamus is the uppermost and acts like a switchboard, routing signals from the reticular formation and sensory impulses that come in to various parts of the areas of the cerebral cortex. So it's kind of that switchboard area. So important, right there, the switchboard. And going on from the thalamus to the hypothalamus, this area here next to the thalamus, is a control unit for the body's autonomic nervous system, which controls the brainstem, the endocrine system, and the pituitary gland. So we got a lot of things. This thing is so important, this little hypothalamus. It also monitors temperature. So when your temperature gets too high or too low, pressure, composition of your blood. It makes adjustment to control your sweating and your shivering to the temperature, and also controls some heart rate when your temperature goes up and goes faster, and your blood vessel tensions. It also works with your liver within your liver for your liver digestive system, and it activates your kidney. So what a lot of things. Also, it's responsible for the physical effects of your emotion, like rage and fear. And when you become fear, it activates your sympathetic nervous system and directs a release of this a chemical hormone called epinephrine or adrenaline. And adrenaline increases your heartbeat real fast and breathing really fast, and your cell activity, your pupils dilate big, and your muscles are tense, and your digestion slows down. So like you're ready for fear. Your fear is causing you, or whatever your stress is causing you, to activate fight or flight mode, right? Your sympathetic nervous system. It also generates desires for hunger and thirst through the pituitary gland. And it regulates your growth hormones. Can you imagine? Growth. So we have growth, we have hunger and thirst, we have flight or fight, adrenaline coming out, we have temperature, modifying your temperature and your digestive gland and your kidneys and your liver. The hypothalamus does so much. This gland does so much. Can't even imagine how much. And also there are other structures here. Hippocampus, and that is a place where your memories are stored. They have factual memories for storage. And then you have the amygdala. Where's the amygdala? Right here. The amygdala comes right up here, the amygdala here. The amygdala generates emotions and processes our memories there too. And then you have various others. You have an olfactory lobe. That olfactory means goes to your nose, your nose and breathing type. Not your breathing in your chest, but your olfactory means to your nose. And then you have the pituitary gland, which I said is activated by the hypothalamus. Very important gland. That's your limbic system. So let's go on, see if there's limbic system. Go on to the last page here. This part, you need to really read this part and go on to what this guy says about science and how God is in control. Can you imagine how all of these parts of our nervous system could have just happened? No way. The basically knowing that it used to be when I was in taking psychology, when I was in high school, they talked about behaviorism, and behaviorism was a philosophy that person's actions can be completely explained by responses to stimuli. So they took these mice and they tried to change these mice by giving them food or not giving them food or doing these different things. And they called it behavior modification. Well, now as we look in the brain, the brain is really not controlled by behavior modification like they thought. And those Pavlov mice experiments they did before, and B.F. Skinner, he was the head of that whole thing. It's not considered to be a valid philosophy when it comes to biology. As Christians, we know that the mind does not consist simply of neurons and electrochemical reactions. We're not just a body full of neurons and chemicals. No, the mind and the brain really are not the same. Basically, I say this because God's word makes it clear that we also have a spiritual component. We have a soul and we have a spirit. It's not just we have a brain that's responding, but we have a spirit and a soul that longs for our Creator and a relationship for our Creator. And so we can't explain everything in physical terms. And this Sir John Eccles, I think his name is, Nobel in medicine, and I love what he says. He says, science has gone too far in breaking down man's belief in his spiritual greatness and has given him the belief that he is merely an insignificant animal who has arisen by chance and necessity on an insignificant planet lost in a great cosmic immensity. But then he says, but I am a Christian. Science can't explain who I am and why I'm here. That's our relationship with God.